What's going on, guys? Twigging Timber Outdoors, and today I'm going to break down 3 of my favorite nymph rigs that I can fish in any type of water and any type of occasion. Now, the examples I've tied up for you today, I actually used fairly large streamers to show you guys a little easier on the camera. The first one I used for fairly quick water that I don't necessarily need to enact too much action on the nymphs themselves. However, I feel it's a great representation when I need that very tight, direct connection to each fly, and that is a rig setup that kind of better imitates a direct line like you would see in tight line nymphing. So what I have here is here's my first fly. Now I would normally have some additional line up here, but my line connects directly into this first fly. And how I did that was I took my line and I ran the fly all the way up my tippet, and then I just tied a clinch knot with a long tag end. And I did the same thing to the second fly. Again, I ran the fly up to where I wanted it to be. I tied a very large clinch knot with a very long tag end, and then that tag end, I put my point fly. This happens to be a fairly heavy weighted fly. That way I have a very direct connection, bouncing along the bottom, feeling every tick. Now, that bottom fly, in this case, I tried to put a little closer to the point fly, which is that heavy one, and the other one here a little higher because, well, this was just an example I tied. But that's the first example. You're tying them directly into the leader. They don't really have as much action as this next example. However, you have a better feel and a better indication of when you get takes. Now, all these rigs can be run underneath an indicator or without one. You can even use a sighter if you prefer. This next one allows me to impart a little more action and a little more free flow and drift underneath either an indicator or a direct line even. So what we've done is we tie our tippet first, direct line in to our first fly. Now this looks like a mess, but I promise you, in the water it actually looks great. So we've tied directly into this first fly from our line down, and then on our tag end we tie a nice, a second fly. And from that second fly, I attach, without a knot at the bottom, a piece of split shot, if needed, or your point fly here. Now, the split shot's nice because if you get hung up, usually it's going to be that split shot, and you can pop it right off and just add another piece after, or another split shot after. But the way this rides in the water, and if you notice on this top fly, I've added another piece of tippet on the bend of the hook to another fly. Now, what happens is, when this rides through the water, this heavy split shot's going to drag on the bottom. These two flies are going to be a better connection. This one's going to kind of float freely, dance a little bit, if you will, when compared to the other two. And it will run somewhat like this in the water. Okay, somewhat like this in the water. And this is good for slower streams or for very picky spots where you're going to get hung up a lot. So if you're getting hung up a lot, I suggest doing something like this with your split shot. There's no knot at the end. Some people like to tie knots, and that's okay. But what happens is if I get hung up, this split shot right here can just easily pop right off the end. And I can just add another split shot to the end. That's a decent rig right there for very technical waters, but also any waters you know you're going to get hung up. And let's face it, we're going to get hung up if we're fishing in front of the fish's mouth. And the last one I want to talk about today is a staple in fly fishing. Okay, and that is our hopper dropper rig, but more specifically a dry dropper rig, because we don't necessarily need to fish hoppers for this to work. So first off, there are many varieties or variations on how to tie into this, but what I basically did is I tied my tippet, which I'm using monofilament for dry, up to our dry fly here. This happens to be just like a yellow stimulator. And then on the bend of the hook, we add our fly system down to our nymph. Again, usually 1.5 to 2 lengths to the bottom of the water is where we want our, or to the water, or the creek bed, where we want our second fly. Now, you can run the same types of situations, same rigs, off of the end of this dropper that I just showed you a second ago. So if you wanted to run a direct line, you could. If you wanted to run a split system, you could. It's up to you. You don't have to stick to one if you don't want. You can experiment and do some interesting things using these different systems. Okay? The important thing is you need to get out there, throw some flies in the water, and test things out. Hopefully you liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Check out the other videos in the playlist. Share with friends. Okay? And until next time, guys. Catch you guys on the flip side. Tight lines. And we're out.